At my stepson's wedding, the boy I had raised as my own, he looked me straight in the eyes and said I was nothing to him. In front of everyone, I was erased from the story I had helped build. I spent over 20 years calling someone son, only to be called nobody on the most important day of his life. That day, something inside me broke. But that's also the day I started to rise. Because sometimes, rejection is just the beginning of the woman you're meant to become. If you've ever felt invisible to the one you loved the most, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what comes next isn't just pain, it's rebirth. The venue was breathtaking, chandeliers sparkling like constellations, silk curtains drifting with the breeze, and flowers, so many flowers that the air felt sweet and heavy with their perfume. Roses, orchids, lilies. Picture perfect. Laughter echoed gently. Guests clinked glasses. A string quartet played Clair de Lune. And I stood there in a navy blue dress, the one he said looked beautiful on me, feeling completely out of place. From across the room, I saw Ryan, my stepson, beaming. The same sparkle he had when he lost his first tooth and asked if the tooth fairy would visit. But today, he was a grown man. Marrying. Starting a new life. And I was just there. As I'd always been. Quiet. Present. I took a deep breath. My heart was racing. I hoped, in some part of me, that this day would bring a small moment of acknowledgement. A nod. A smile. A simple whisper, "Thank you, Mama Beth." But something in the air told me otherwise. I walked toward him slowly, hands trembling, eyes moist. I was ready to hug him. Ready to celebrate. Ready to be seen. But what happened next? I will never forget. That was the moment everything I refused to see became impossible to ignore. My name is Elizabeth, but most people call me Beth. At the time, I was 56. And up until that day, standing in that ballroom, made invisible in front of everyone, I still believed that true love, even when it doesn't come by blood, could build eternal bonds. I believed that devotion and quiet care, day after day, would eventually overcome time, neglect, and even prejudice. I met Michael when I was 30. I was working as a school librarian and had just come out of a long, painful divorce and 2 heartbreaking miscarriages. I had stopped hoping to become a mother. But as life often does, it surprised me when I least expected it. Michael was gentle, reserved, and quietly broken too. He was a widower raising a 5-year-old son named Ryan. A little boy with wide, sad eyes who often hid behind his father's legs. At our first meeting, he barely spoke. But at the second, he handed me a crayon drawing, a small house with 3 stick figures and a dog. I smiled and asked, "Who's this lady right here?" He said, "That's you, with us." In that moment, something stirred inside me. A silent but powerful bond. Over the months, I became more and more involved. I took Ryan to the park, read bedtime stories, cooked his favorite meals, even when he changed his mind halfway through dinner. I could tell when he needed a hug, when he needed space, and when he was just testing boundaries. The first time he called me Aunt Beth, my chest warmed. The second time, Aunt B, I laughed. But the third time, when he whispered, "Mom," barely audible, almost afraid. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried, hugging his stuffed bear like a lifeline. That one word was something I never thought I'd hear. Over time, I took on every motherly role. Doctor appointments, school meetings, Halloween costumes, Easter baskets. Whenever Michael traveled for work, which was often, I was Ryan's only constant. I'd sleep on the floor next to his bed when his asthma flared up, and make up bedtime stories just to calm his fear of the dark. But being a stepmother is like walking through a minefield. No matter how much love you give, someone will always be there to remind you that you're not the real mom. Tracy, his biological mother, came and went as she pleased. Sometimes, she'd disappear for 6 months. Other times, she'd show up out of the blue and whisk Ryan away for the weekend, bringing him back with expensive toys, empty promises, and a broken spirit. He'd come home quiet, withdrawn, irritable. He'd cry alone, have nightmares. And I was the one sitting beside him through it all, wiping his tears. Still, she was Mom. And I was just the woman in the background. Michael never stood up for me. She's his mother, Beth. You understand, don't you? We have to respect her role. But what about my role? Who respected me? Who protected me? Every time he asked me to understand Tracy's side, something inside me withered. I felt like I was always teetering on the edge, balancing love and silence, care and invisibility. I became the efficient shadow. The fixer. The helper. The listener. But never the one who was seen. As the years went on, it only got worse. When Ryan hit his teenage years, he started pushing back, and he knew exactly where to aim. With a coldness that felt deliberate, he'd say things like, "My real mom would never do that." Or, "You're not my mom." Each time, it cut like a knife. Because yes, biologically, I wasn't. But in every other way, I had been everything a mother could be. Michael brushed it off. It's just a phase. He's confused. But the truth? I no longer had a voice in that house. Only responsibilities. What began as a partnership between me and Michael had become nothing but cohabitation. 2 strangers under one roof. We shared a bed, but our souls lived in different rooms. Michael was a practical man. Polite. Helpful, but distant. He was the kind who bought flowers on birthdays because his phone reminded him. The kind who asked, "Are you okay?" without really wanting an answer. Our marriage, once quiet and tender, had been slowly eroded by routine, by silence, and, most of all, by the absence of affection. There were no more touches. No kind words. Not even arguments, which, in some ways, was worse. Indifference is a slow poison. And for years, I pretended I didn't feel it. Even when I knew the love was gone, even when I realized he no longer saw me as a woman, as a partner. I stayed. Not out of fear. Not out of convenience. I stayed for Ryan. Ryan was the only light in that house. The only reason I still got up early to make pancakes on Saturdays. The reason I still decorated the Christmas tree with care, or left little notes of encouragement in his backpack before school. Every drop of affection my husband no longer gave me, I poured into my stepson. And even when he started to grow cold, even when he hurt me with words he didn't fully understand, I stayed. Because deep down, I still saw that little boy with messy hair and wide, hopeful eyes. The one who once drew me into his family. I used to tell myself, like a silent prayer, "It's worth it. One day, he'll understand. One day, he'll see what I did for him." But eventually, even that began to fade. The bond one thought was unbreakable, was slowly being worn down by resentment, outside influence, and a lack of acknowledgement. Still, I stayed. Even while feeling invisible. Even while feeling unwanted. Even without real love in that house. Because I believed my place was there. That motherhood, even the borrowed kind, was a mission bigger than my own well-being. Today, I know I was wrong. But back then, all I wanted was to be seen. To be loved. To be recognized. And sadly, that never came. Not from Michael. Not from Ryan. Ryan's wedding was supposed to be a happy milestone, a celebration of life, family, and love. And in many ways, I clung to that idea like it was my last hope of being seen. As if, at that altar, he would finally say to the world, "She's my real mother." We spent months planning everything together. I was there for every detail, side by side with him and his fiancée. We picked out the flowers, the cake, the invitations. I researched vendors, managed the budget, booked the DJ. His fiancée, who was always kind, called me my other mother-in-law. And Ryan, always confident by my side, often said, "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even know where to start." I helped choose the tuxedo, the color palette, the ceremony rehearsal schedule. When he hesitated between 2 shades of blue for the decor, I told him, "Go with petrol blue. It's elegant. And it brings out your eyes." He smiled and replied, "That's why I trust you, Beth. You always get it right." At the time, I had no idea those would be some of the last kind words I'd hear from him. I didn't know that everything we had built would be erased by a single, brutal moment. His biological mother, Tracy, showed up just 1 week before the wedding, after being absent for months. She arrived in a tailored dress, with a salon appointment, professional makeup, and her own photo session already booked. She was treated like the star of the event, as if the years she vanished had left no trace. And then came the sharpest blow of all. Ryan chose her to walk him down the aisle. Arm in arm. I sat in the front row, watching the scene unfold like I was outside my own body. He walked slowly down the aisle with the woman who had abandoned him again and again, and the crowd was moved. Photos captured the smiles. The perfect image. And I sat there, frozen. A knot in my throat. Feeling the ground collapse beneath me. It felt like watching a movie about my life, except I wasn't in the cast anymore. Not even a supporting role. As if I had never existed. Still. I held my head high. I told myself, the speech will come. He'll say my name. He'll acknowledge me. I pictured him pointing to me and saying, "This is Beth. The woman who raised me. Who never walked away." But what I got was the final blow. During the reception, the MC announced, "And now, a toast to the groom's family." Everyone turned to Ryan. He smiled, raised his glass, and took a deep breath. "I want to thank my father, Michael, for being my rock. And my mother, Tracy, who, despite all the challenges, never stopped loving me." Tracy. The woman who disappeared for relationships, addictions, emotional breakdowns. The one who left for months and returned like nothing happened. But there, in front of everyone, she was celebrated. Then he looked at me. And for a moment, my heart skipped. This is it. He's about to say it. But what came out of his mouth was, "And, special thanks to those who were part of my life. Some were temporary, some stayed. And some, well, weren't really family, but were around." Applause. Toasts. Smiles. And I just stood there, holding myself together with every last thread. Those words weren't just an omission. They were a public dismissal. A silent cut that separated me, for good, from the role I thought I had in his life. Everything around me blurred. The lights. The sounds. The faces. The world kept celebrating. But inside me, it was just static, and one phrase looping endlessly. Not really family. Temporary. I had been everything but temporary. I was his home. His anchor. His mother in every way that mattered. And still. I was erased. I stumbled to the hotel bathroom. Locked the door. Collapsed to the floor. My knees gave out. I curled into myself and cried like a child with no one to hold her. My makeup ran. My chest ached like a knife had been planted there, and twisted. But the worst part wasn't the noise. It was the silence. No one came after me. Not Michael, who saw my face fall and kept drinking. Not Ryan. Not the bride. Not a single soul. The next morning, the world felt mute. I packed my things slowly. No anger. No drama. Just that kind of exhaustion that settles in your bones, the one heavier than any suitcase. I walked through the house, ran my fingers over an old photo frame, the three of us at Disney. Ryan was 10, his face covered in ice cream. I remembered him grabbing my hand in line for Space Mountain, saying, "You're with me, right, Beth?" But now I knew. He wasn't with me anymore. I left a simple note on the kitchen table. Today, I choose to step out of the shadows. Elizabeth. I closed the door without making a sound. And for the first time in years, I was the one who left. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I had to leave. I needed to breathe air that didn't reek of dismissal. I needed to walk streets where no one knew my name, or my story. The only place that came to mind was a small town in Vermont, where my great-aunt had left behind a modest cottage. I hadn't been there in years, but somehow, it felt like the only shelter left. The house was small, with peeling paint and a garden long forgotten. There was no luxury, but there was silence. And for the first time in my life, I needed silence. But silence hurts too. The loneliness of those first nights was suffocating. The mattress squeaked, the wind scratched at the windows, and the memories. The memories came like knives, sharp and unrelenting. Laughter in the hallway. Sunday morning pancakes. Sleepless nights with a thermometer and a cold cloth. Memories of the boy I raised. The boy who, in the end, treated me like I was no one. Some nights I'd wake up crying. Other nights, I wouldn't sleep at all. The pain felt embedded in my bones. The little money I had would last only a few months. I had no idea how to start over. Who would hire a 56-year-old woman with a resume written in scars, not skills? One cold afternoon, I met her. Dorothy, my next-door neighbor. She was a petite woman, sharp eyes and steady hands despite her age. Always wore a floral apron and a headscarf tied neatly, like she had stepped out of an old recipe book. She saw me sweeping dead leaves from the yard and walked over with a small basket. First winter here's always the hardest. I brought something that might help. I opened the basket, and the smell of warm, fresh bread wrapped around me like a forgotten hug. It was simple, a crispy crust, soft inside. "You made this?" I asked. "I bake every day. Been selling at the Saturday market ever since my husband passed, nearly 30 years ago. Saved me from sadness. And rent," she smiled. We started talking more. She'd invite me in for tea, share stories about the village. She showed me her tiny kitchen, humble, but full of warmth, with a big window where the sunlight poured in every morning. One day, she handed me a lump of dough and asked, "You've got good hands, Elizabeth. Ever worked with fermentation?" I paused, surprised by the question. "I used to bake bread for Ryan, when he was little. He loved it with strawberry jam." She smiled softly. "Then there's love in your hands. And that's all good bread really needs." I started helping her on weekends. She taught me everything: resting times, flour secrets, how to feed the sourdough starter just right. I learned like I was learning how to breathe again. Kneading the dough became therapy. The rhythm. The heat of the oven. The smell of yeast rising. It gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. Watching the bread rise, brown, come out steaming, it made me feel alive. For the first time in a long while, I was creating something. And it wasn't going to leave me in the end. With Dorothy's encouragement, I started experimenting on my own. Herb baguettes, whole grain loaves with seeds, sweet rolls with spices. She convinced me to take some to the Saturday market and sell alongside hers. At first, just a few sold. 3 loaves. Then 5. One lady complimented the smell. A young man said it reminded him of his grandmother's bread. I went home with $22, and a pocket full of hope. But with hope, came fear too. That voice, the one that always came at night, whispered again. What if you fail? What if he was right, and you really are nobody? Still, by Sunday, I was making another batch. With every loaf that came out of the oven, I rebuilt myself, piece by piece. I didn't know where it would lead. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. And for the first time in years, I was building something that was mine. One day, Dorothy looked at a tray of freshly baked bread and said, "Did you know that dough only rises after being punched down hard? Maybe, we do too." The old garage was full of rusted tools, dusty boxes, and cobwebs in every corner. But when I looked at that space with the eyes of someone starting over, I didn't see clutter, I saw possibility. Turning it into an artisan kitchen wasn't easy. I bought white paint to brighten the walls, put up makeshift shelves using reclaimed wood, and purchased a second-hand oven with the money from my early sales. Nothing fancy. Just, full of love. Every dollar I made went into that space. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't go out to eat. But every time I turned on that oven, it felt like I was lighting something inside myself too. In that small, flour-dusted room, I started to exist again. I created a simple blog and named it Second Rise, a play on baking and second chances. I posted photos of my bread, shared recipes, scattered thoughts. And little by little, I began to share my story. No names. No specific events. Just emotional truths that spoke louder than details. Sometimes, you give your all, and still get discarded. Not giving birth doesn't make you any less of a mother. Pain is the oven where growth rises. And then, the messages began to pour in. Women from all over the country. Adoptive moms. Stepmothers who had been overlooked. Grandmothers who had raised their grandchildren like their own. Women who, like me, had loved so deeply, they forgot themselves in the process. One day, a teacher from the local school showed up at the market with a teenage student. She recognized me from the blog and said, "You should share this in person. The women around here need to hear your story." I didn't know what to say. I had never imagined standing in front of a crowd. But I said yes. A week later, I was at the public library, hands shaking, voice trembling, telling my story out loud, for the first time. At the end of the talk, a woman stood up with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, for not giving up on yourself." Her words echoed through my soul. The following week, I hosted a small gathering at my home. I invited a few neighbors, all women over 50, and taught them the basics of artisan bread. One brought a cake. Another taught us crochet. Another shared how to grow medicinal herbs. We told stories. We laughed. We shared silence too. Because sometimes, what we need most is to be surrounded by women who understand what it means to fall, and rise again. Something bigger than us was born that day. A silent network of second chances. We called our group the Rising Circle. Because we had all been pushed down. But now, we were standing up again. Together. We started selling at the local markets. Bread, cakes, jam, handmade soap, knitted blankets. Neighbors came to chat. Daughters brought their mothers. Husbands started showing respect. Sons started listening. And we started believing again. Meanwhile, Michael kept sending messages. First asking how I was. Then, asking if I would ever consider coming back. Then, silence. But Ryan. Ryan came back. It started with a quiet message. Hi, Beth. I know it's been a while. But I think about you a lot. Then came a phone call. Long, hesitant. Full of emotion. He told me he had a son. A little boy. Sometimes, when he cries at night. I remember you. Sitting beside me with a flashlight and a book. Telling me stories until I calmed down. He said he missed me. That he wanted to talk. To reconnect. He said Tracy was still distant, even with a grandchild in the picture. And now, as a father. He was beginning to understand things he never could before. Having a son changed everything. It made me think about who was really there for me. It made me look back, and really see you, Beth. For a few moments, the silence between us was filled with something rare. Truth. And for the first time, I heard regret in his voice. But I wasn't waiting anymore. Not because I didn't care, but because I had learned that what tied me to them wasn't love. It was the desperate hope of being acknowledged. Now. I had acknowledged myself. I was a woman. Whole. Strong. And most importantly, free. 2 years had passed. My days were filled with baking, weekend markets, community talks, and growing our group, the Rising Circle. But some nights, that ache of, what if, still came. Not as pain. But as a scar. I didn't expect anything anymore. And maybe that's exactly why his message caught me off guard. It was a quiet Friday night. The next morning's market was all prepped, and I was just about to crawl into bed when my phone buzzed. It was a message on the blog. Beth, it's Ryan. I know I don't have the right. But, can I call you? My heart skipped a beat. Not with pain, but with something quieter. A strange, cautious kind of hope. The next day, he called. His voice was deeper now, hesitant, but still had that familiar undertone. He told me he was still married to Emily. And they had a son. Liam. That's why I'm calling. Because now I get it. Now that I'm a father. I see everything differently. He paused. You were my mother. And I erased you. I regret it, every single day. I didn't answer right away. Not because I felt nothing. But because there was too much to feel, and none of it fit inside a single phone call. Over the next few days, we exchanged messages. Photos. He sent me a video of Liam taking his first steps. And then wrote. Emily really wants you in his life. She says no child should grow up not knowing the person who loved their father so well. Emily. A woman I barely knew. But one who seemed to see more clearly than many who had been around me for a lifetime. The following week, Ryan called again. His voice was heavier this time. Dad's in the hospital. It's not looking good. I think he'd like to see you. I hesitated. The last time I saw Michael was the day I closed that door, and opened another one inside myself. But something told me this chapter needed to close with dignity. So I prepared a basket. Fresh bread. Homemade jams. And went to the hospital. When I stepped into the room, he looked up at me like he'd seen a ghost. He was thin. Pale. Eyes sunken. But the moment he saw me, tears fell silently down his cheeks. Beth, please forgive me. I failed you. I was a coward. I stood there, quietly, for a few seconds. Looking at the man who had once been my home. Then my prison. And now, just a broken man filled with regret. You left me alone in the most painful moment of my life. I know. And if I could go back. But we can't, Michael. I wished so badly that you would fight for me. But now, I fight for myself. And for every woman who's ever thought she had to beg for love. I placed the basket by his bedside. I didn't bring flowers. I brought bread. You always liked that better. He smiled weakly. And I left. No anger. No bitterness. Just the deep, calm certainty that I didn't belong in that story anymore. Down in the hospital lobby, Ryan was waiting. Liam in his arms. It was the first time I saw the boy in person. And for just a second, my heart beat faster. Like I was stepping back in time, but also forward. Liam stretched his arms toward me with that unfiltered joy only children have. I walked closer, slowly. And he smiled. Liam, this is Beth, Ryan said gently. Mama, the boy babbled. Ryan let out a quiet laugh, emotional. He calls every woman who smiles at him that. But if you're okay with it, I'd love for him to call you that for real. And in that moment, holding that little boy in my arms, looking into Ryan's eyes, I saw something I had waited decades to see. Recognition. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. But from clarity. From love. There were no grand apologies. No promises to fix the past. Just something far more rare. A new beginning. Today, at 58 years old, I'm the founder of a women's cooperative with over 40 members, all of them rebuilding their lives after the age of 50. The Rising Circle has grown into something real, something powerful. We've become a living community, with weekly workshops, events, mentorships, and a local market that brings the entire town together. Our story was featured in a national news segment. I've been invited to speak at universities, to appear on podcasts, and to write a book. My name, once erased, is now spoken with admiration. As a symbol of second chances. Of starting over late. And rising stronger. I bought a simple home by a lake. I have a dog named Lucky, who joins me every morning for walks through the mist. I planted a lavender garden by the front door, and every week, I pick a fresh bundle just to keep the scent of peace in my kitchen. But what moves me most deeply is that Ryan, Emily, and little Liam are now part of my life. Ryan calls every week. Sometimes just to chat about work. Sometimes just to say he misses me. Emily sends me videos of Liam making messes in the kitchen, painting with flour, dipping his fingers in jam. She says she wants him to grow up knowing where the smell of fresh bread comes from. To understand the value of care. And the strength of silent love. On Saturday afternoons, they visit. Liam runs wild through the garden like it's his own kingdom. He calls me Grandma Beth in the sweetest, softest voice. And while he plays, Ryan comes over. Smiling gently. Helping me water the lavender. Not needing to say anything. Just being there. We didn't erase the past. We chose to write a new chapter. And sometimes, I look at all of it and think. Not every kind of love gets returned the way we hope. But every bit of love we give, builds something inside us. And I built it. Brick by brick. Pain by pain. Scar by scar. Today, I'm no longer the woman waiting to be chosen. I'm the woman who chose herself. I'm Elizabeth. And if once I was invisible, today, I'm a light for many women. And for a little grandson who's already learned that love doesn't need blood to be real. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without giving it a like. It helps the channel grow and reach more people. And if you want more emotional stories of healing and second chances, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's so much more to come. Which part of this story moved you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear them. And now, click on the end screen to watch another powerful story that's sure to touch your heart.